It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us for Theology of the Body Thursday is our executive director here at Redeemer Radio, Cindy Black. Thanks for being here, Cindy. Last time we were talking about the sexual abuse scandal and how just kind of a general disregard for the way God created us and our sexuality can be a contributing factor to this. Obviously, there's evil in the world, there's sin, and there's different ways to look at it. But one of the things that we started getting into, and we ran out of time, and so we said we'd definitely come back to this, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it, is how do we talk to our children to help prepare? I mean, unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do to 100% protect our children from every possible evil in this world. But what are some steps that we can do to help them to understand when somebody might be trying to take advantage of them? We do the, don't take candy from strangers, right. Don't get into vehicles. What about when whether it be a classmate, a babysitter, an adult, or somebody in a leadership position, how do we prepare them and guide them, and how do you talk to especially little kids about such a sensitive topic?
Well, I think it is best if we start as early as possible with age-appropriate things. Mm-hmm. So even with a toddler, teaching them different parts of the body, and that not all parts of the body are the same, that they have a specific name. I think, as much as we like to have cutesy names for certain body parts, I think it is best to also make sure that children understand the appropriate, like the medical term for different parts of their body. Yeah. Because then it isn't seen as like a toy or plaything. It's seen as having a function or a purpose. Yeah. So I think starting at a very young age, telling our kids what different body parts are, especially the parts that make them boy or girl, naming them and saying that they have a particular use. I think also talking about how they are private, that they're special parts of our body that are so special that they're meant to be kept private. And then something that's private is allowed to be seen by certain people and not allowed to be seen by others. Okay. So putting those parameters of, mommy and daddy are allowed to look at those parts, or you don't have to hide those parts from mommy and daddy, especially at certain times, like if there's something wrong and we need to look at it. I think that also stretching that out to pictures, saying just like, somebody that's not mommy and daddy shouldn't see those parts. We also shouldn't see other people's private parts, either in real life or in pictures. Sure. So helping young children to understand that. And then letting them know that there aren't secrets from mommy and daddy about those parts also. Now, there are certain cases where somebody besides mommy and daddy, a doctor perhaps, or if grandma's coming to watch them, explaining to the child, she's going to help you take a bath, and it's okay for her to see, mommy and daddy know this, and those types of things. So then the same thing is with touch, is talking about what are okay touches for those parts of the body. It's okay to touch them to clean them. It's okay to touch them for the purpose that they are meant to be used for, but it's not okay to touch them in other ways. Letting them know that sometimes when we touch those parts of our body, it might tickle or feel good, and kind of helping them to understand what that means, to be aware of it so that they're not surprised by it or don't think, that they put it in the right perspective. Yeah. But again, reminding them that those parts of the body do have a purpose, and that the purpose isn't, they don't exist for pleasure, that they do have a purpose. So if you have little ones, I'm going to start naming some examples here pretty soon, which I'm going to try to do it in such a way that you could talk to even a toddler with. So hopefully you're okay with what I'm about to say, but just in case, you may want to turn down your radio.
We'll have it available in the podcast after the fact if you need to catch up later.
So, for example, with a little boy, their penis is for peeing. That is the only purpose for their penis until they're married. It's for peeing. So trying to remind, it's not uncommon for little ones to explore their bodies with their hands. So oftentimes you will see a little boy with his hand in his diaper, and you can simply remind them, your penis has a purpose. It's for peeing. It's not for playing with. Toys are for playing with.
Yeah.
So helping them to understand that our body parts have a purpose and understanding how our bodies and people are different from objects. So similarly, we shouldn't use parts of our body for things that they're not intended for. Likewise, other people's bodies are not ours to use to decide what purpose they serve also. So helping them to kind of understand those parameters. And like I alluded to before, making sure that they understand that what we do with our body and that those private parts, that there can be no secrets from mom and dad on that.
Yeah.
That if anyone says that they have to keep it a secret or something bad will happen, if we're being proactive in saying that to our children and we're not doing it in a scary way, if we're just saying, hey, you know what, if anyone were ever to say, this, I just want you to know that that's not true.
Right.
And letting them know that they do need to come to you. If anyone is talking about looking at or touching or talking about body parts, that no one should ever take pictures of their private body parts, and to let them know that they will not be in trouble, that actually it's the opposite, that they could be in trouble if they don't tell mommy and daddy about this.
Because I think that's a big issue with this is the idea of shame, that people don't talk about when something happens because they're ashamed of it. And so to really instill in your child that it is okay and it's good to come and talk to me about this.
Right.
But it's a hard balance because you don't want them to think that it's good for it to happen, so.
And that's why you kind of have to lay the parameters first about what's okay to see, who's allowed to see and who's not, and things like that. That not only is that for somebody doing to them, but they're not to with other people as well, even other children. Like, it's not okay for you to ever ask to see the private parts of somebody else, of one of your friends or something like that.
Yeah, we want to respect other people's privacy.
Yes.
As well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that that's important to say, even family friends, even aunts and uncles, even cousins, that like certain parts of our body are so sacred that they're private, and really the only conversation should be at their age is with mommy and daddy about those things.
We're talking with Cindy Black for Theology of the Body Thursday. How do we talk to our children about this so we can protect them? And really, I feel like the way that you described it, I can imagine you saying that to a 3-year-old, and I can imagine you saying that to an 18-year-old. Really, I mean, even some of the wording. Now, you might use a different voice or something like that, but really, it seems like just as appropriate and not really anything inappropriate to say to a kid that you just explained versus literally an adult.
Right.
So
a 12-year-old has the same parts and they still serve the same purpose because they're not married. Then when you marry, then the penis has 2 purposes.
Yeah.
And that's how it can be used, and there's parameters that we've talked about in Theology about the Body. It's a notion of self-gift. It still has a purpose and needs to be used according to the purpose.
And I suppose you could probably start to get into a little bit more details as the kid gets older about different forms of abuse and what it would look like, and to make sure that if this ever happens, you need to tell somebody and things like that. But at the basic level, keep it simple.
Right. And I think reiterating to our children something that's probably implied that we don't say to them very often. One of our jobs as being entrusted as their parents by God is to protect them, is to keep them from harm. So if something is being said to them or done to them that makes them feel uncomfortable at all, or make like that they question or feel even ashamed of, our job is to help protect them from that. So they need to let us do our jobs. They need to bring it to us so that we can help them to process it. So telling them that that's the appropriate response is bringing it to mom and dad.
Well, and unfortunately, I feel like as parents, we get nervous about the idea of talking about this to our kids. And so then we avoid it. When who is going to talk to them about it if we don't?
Right.
How are they going to learn about it if we don't teach them? And we can't expect, hopefully this is covered in the schools, but we can't expect the schools to cover it. We've got to make sure that we take that initiative.
Well, and I mean, we have a natural modesty that, I mean, every time I've brought up anything having to do with private body parts, my kids like squirm.
Yeah, right.
So actually, the school isn't the best place to do that because they're sitting in a classroom with other kids their age and they feel like they naturally get embarrassed. This really should be something that we make sure that we hold as a very grave responsibility as parents, is to talk to our kids about.
How often do you think we should bring this up with our kids? Because I feel like that might be the other tendency to say, like, oh, we talked about that when he was 4. We don't need to have that talk again.
You know, that's a good question. I think pretty regularly. And I think that praying to the Holy Spirit, asking the Holy Spirit to say, okay, am I saying this a little bit too much? Am I not saying it enough? And then stepping out of our comfort zone and addressing it as that. Like, we don't want to be obsessive about it. And like every time they take a bath, reminding them of it.
Right.
But I think knowing your children too, that some kids have to be told things over and over and over again, but others, it kind of sticks with them. And also just saying, maybe quizzing them, like, hey, do you remember we talked about this? And seeing what they remember and having them tell us back. And if they remember everything and tell us back, it's not us telling them again, but we can still make sure that that information is at the forefront of their minds.
Can you think of other situations that we might want to be asking questions? I'm kind of imagining, okay, the kid plays on his tablet several times throughout the week, just kind of checking in, like, hey, have you ever seen anything on there that like a person where they don't have all their clothes on or something like that? Are there some of those things, like if somebody spends the night at somebody else's house, has anybody ever asked you, or when you're in the restroom, does anybody ever talk to you about showing you your private parts? Or
I'm not sure I would get that specific. If you're questioning, like, when you spend the night at this person's house, you probably shouldn't let them spend the night there unless you really know. And I'd be really careful about older siblings and things like that. The reality is, the more I interact with people, especially talking about theology of the body, the more people share with me things that have happened to them when they were younger. Yeah. It is really, like, it's pretty widespread. So I just think making sure that we know the situations that we're sending our kids into, and not assuming that just because somebody has similar faith or values that everyone in their household feels that way and things like that. I mean, the sad reality is that most abuse, over 30% of abuse, happens within a family. So being cognizant that it's not always, kind of it's rarely a stranger. A lot of times it's an aunt or uncle, cousin, older sibling, or a friend's family member that ends up being the perpetrator. All
right. Well, such an important topic. I feel like it's something that we need to be talking about as a community, and something that we need to be talking about with our kids. So thanks for sharing that with us. Anything to look forward to next week's Theology of the Body Thursday? Well, I think we'll talk a little bit about, there's a lot of conversations about how do we fix this problem of abuse by priests in the church, by clergy. And we, of course, should take any measures necessary, but there's things being thrown around like celibacy, connecting it with celibacy, that I really don't think that the logic follows. So I think maybe we'll talk about that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cindy, for joining us again. Good to be here.